We were so stuck in just working so hard constantly. It was never a moment to think about the business.
We didn't have structured systems in place. It was all through the creative process and through our skills. But as each year's gone on, the scale and the size of the projects we're working on is just next level.
So what are some of the things that you've changed?
It's about deciding who do I really want to work with and going, right, well, let's get a list of all those people and all those different companies and let's just chip away at messaging them and getting those conversations going, really.
You've got to decide what's the best use of your time. So we're looking at everybody's priorities and everybody's list and saying, is that the best use of their time? Is there someone else that should or could be doing that?
It's an education piece with different clients that we work with and sort of showing them the value in how we can help them really early on.
What are some of the ways that you are able to now start conversations with people? How do you get them on a call and how do you now demonstrate the value of what you do?
I guess it's about
if you've been running your business for a while and you're starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed, maybe even a little bit burnt out, then today's episode is for you. I sit down with some of my long-term clients On The Sly, who are an international audio production agency that have worked on global events such as the London New Year's Eve fireworks, Coachella, and even helped launch Paramount Plus streaming service. Today, we're digging into the importance of systems in your business, landing ideal clients through outreach, and how to get a better work-life balance. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe and share it with a friend. I'd love to actually start by you guys talking a little bit about the start of your journey. Like we were just chatting at lunch and I just found that quite interesting. So I guess the first question is, how long have you been running this business?
we just had our 21st birthday back in April. We're a slow overnight success. That's what we are. It's been a bit of a journey, hasn't it? That's for sure. It kind of started back in, if you go right back to the beginning, Chris and I went to school together. So we used to kind of work on, kind of college radio and local radio and things like that. That was our background, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And we used to kind of do lots of kind of production and radio work then. And that's kind of where our sort of passion started and our careers started, really. And then, you tell about where you went off to and how it all came about.
Yeah, so I guess, if you think about it looking back, it was probably back in about, maybe 1997 or something when we started doing, started off in radio branding and radio imaging. And, we used to do CDs with stickers on that said On The Sly in 1997 or 1998. Yeah. Sort of working at various places from, and we went on our individual sort of careers through radio stations. I was working in Brighton and then Glasgow and then Birmingham and then went off to Australia and 5 years in Sydney, 2 years in Melbourne and then back to London. And most of that time I was sort of working on The Sly. And the reason it was called On The Sly was because we used to have day jobs and we used to do it in the evening. So it's kind of like we were doing moonlighting. We're doing it on The Sly in the evening. Mm-hmm. So that's why it was called On The Sly. And I was sort of doing it around evenings and weekends, around my day jobs, right through until I came back to the UK in 2013. I know you've been working pretty much full-time in various gauges since probably, 2004?
Yeah, 2004 is when I kind of went freelance and had a load of freelance work, but then balanced the kind of the company work too. And then that's kind of slowly increased over time, essentially, to where we are today. So it's been a slow burn.
I guess it felt like it started off like basically a sort of a group of freelancers. We sort of added people along the way, and then we formed it as a company officially in 2003, and been a company ever since. Yeah,
and I guess we should probably preface all of this with we're kind of always being quite anti-corporate, I suppose. It was never our intention to kind of have a business and grow a big business and to try and make as much money as possible. That was never what we wanted to do. We just wanted to kind of work on cool projects, didn't we? And kind of work with mates, essentially. And, this group of freelancers that just kind of works on cool, fun stuff and scratches that creative itch that we have over time, and it's just kind of snowballed from there, really.
Exactly. And obviously while it started in radio, then it sort of springboarded through all sorts of audio, through trailers and sound design and post mixes, and then in the last sort of 6 years or so into sort of more live events.
Yeah, so when we first met, I think the business had been running pretty full time for about 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So That's kind of an interesting point to pick things up, because I think the 10-year mark in a business always kind of brings certain things up. It's often a time that people reflect. We're like, right, we've been doing this for 10 years now. Can you remember some of the things that were happening day to day or week to week, or some of the conversations you were having that made you decide you wanted to get some outside perspective and get a little bit of support?
We'd kind of been talking about it every now and again for a while, and sort of saying, oh, we should be speaking to someone. Do we need like a non-exec director or just some outside perspective, as you say? And I think you were kind of referred to us, and the opportunity came up to have a chat with you, and it kind of, a few sort of light bulbs went off, I guess. It was kind of that opportunity just to kind of assess what we were doing from the outside, because I think we were so stuck in just working so hard constantly. It was never a moment to think about the business, really, was it? We were just like full on projects constantly, and like always burning out.
Yeah, we were always flat out, and it felt like we were always flying by the seat of our pants. Don't get me wrong, we were doing some brilliant work with some brilliant people, with some fantastic clients, and they loved us, but there was very little sort of slack in the business. There was very little downtime. There was sort of always on the edge of burnout, because, we've been sort of just throwing everything at it. And, we got to the stage where we were sort of building the business, and we then add a new sort of staff member every 1 to 2 years. We get absolutely maxed out. We need some help. Get someone else. Get absolutely maxed out. Need some help. But we were just sort of basically just going all guns at it without any sort of third perspective, or without any sort of being able to zoom out and sort of decide, what are we doing and why are we doing it?
Yeah, I guess we kind of, as I say, we had grown organically over time as like these freelancers that were just working together, and it was never really approached as like a professional business as such, I suppose. And we never had those kind of structures or systems in place.
Yeah, I guess that's it. It feels like systems. We didn't have structured systems in place for many things. It was all through the creative process and through our skills that we built up over the years and our networks, but we didn't have the proper back-end systems when we were sort of just growing and growing and growing. So we really needed to sort of put some stuff in place to give us some structure and to allow us to focus on what we wanted to focus on.
Yeah, and there's quite a common thing in the creative industries, right? You get into it, like you said, you were freelancing before, you had jobs before that, you build a business because you want maybe a bit more freedom, a bit more autonomy, you see the opportunity, and it's like, you're good at what you do more of that, then you need other people to help you, and this thing just kind of snowballs and grows organically, and then you get to a point and you go, you take a breath, and it's like, this is actually pretty full on. Do we need to think about this a bit differently? Do we need to start, thinking more strategically about what we're doing? And so you talking to me earlier about, you both got families, like how is this always working, always on, slightly reactive to the things coming in? How is that impacting you personally as directors?
You've been speaking to my wife, haven't you? Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. The pressure, there's a lot of pressure. Even now, you feel that kind of pressure. And as the business grows and the snowball gets bigger, so the pressure increases. I remember we try and have these kind of away days once a year, don't we? And
staff get together.
Staff get-togethers with everyone, and with family and things like that, just to kind of have a moment to kind of chill out and reflect on things. And the first kind of bigger one that we did, I remember we were sat around this really big table, and at the time, Matthew, one of our employees, had just joined us, and he leaned across, he said, "Wow, look at all these people you're responsible for." And I went, yeah. And I sat there and I'm like, oh my God, I'd never really kind of considered it before. I'm like, yeah, I really am. And that kind of pressure is definitely there. And that's something we've tried to that's one of the sort of motivations really for kind of stabilizing everything, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the good thing is we all have different sort of skill sets, and we all complement each other quite well. So we play to each other's strengths. But yeah, you're right. As it's grown, it's sort of snowballed quite a lot. So it was important for us to be able to take a step back and decide, what do we want to keep on doing? What do we want to stop doing? Why are we doing it? And then what do we need to work on? And what sort of monitoring and systems do we need to put in place to understand on a granular level how we're doing, rather than just creatively, we're doing great work, we're doing great projects, but just to sort of support the business as a business rather than just an ongoing conveyor belt of great creative projects.
You mentioned burnout a few times. How was that showing up for you? How did you know you were nearing burnout?
Just kind of moments where, I've always loved what I do. I don't feel like I work because I feel like it's kind of my passion, and, I get to work with really cool people on cool projects, doing fun stuff, working in recording studios and pressing buttons, and that's kind of what I always wanted to do. But, those kind of moments where the weekend finishes, I'm like, oh my God, I just don't want to go back in tomorrow. The kind of proper red flags for me. Or when you just feel completely exhausted and it's Monday morning, you're like, oh, I've now got to start the week. Do you know what I mean? Those kind of things they're the kind of red flags from my point of view.
Yeah, I think also just, if you look at the situation with when any of us went on holidays, the senior team, it would nearly always be a 2 a.m. or a 3 a.m. finish before the handovers get sent. And, that was something that we needed to attack because it was just too much, and we didn't have enough sort of systems of delegation. Mm-hmm. And that is a lot better now. We now can finish at a normal time rather than 3 a.m. Day before holiday.
Yeah.
So there was a couple of things going on. There was this feeling of overworking, feeling like maybe the snowball was running away from you a little bit. The other thing that we talked about on our initial call was this feeling that you had a lack of kind of sales or marketing knowledge and skills, and you were quite over-reliant on word of mouth and things like that. How was that showing up sort of day to day? What were the symptoms of that?
The main reason is whenever we work with a new client, it always goes really well. We always end up working with them for a long time and have really good relationships. And I think that's always been a real strength of our business and our team. But one thing that was really obvious to me, whenever we went to a new market or met new people, they had never heard of us. We just had no profile whatsoever in any part of our business. And you're like, this is nuts. We're working on these huge projects, big international projects, and no one has even heard of us. So there was this kind of massive hole with brand recognition, I guess.
Yeah, and other than having sort of the portfolio work, we didn't have any sort of approach or strategy for introducing ourselves to new people and for educating them and explaining, the value of our expertise. So it was very sort of passive, very inbound, very passive, very network-based, but with no real sort of appreciation of the best way to expose ourselves to new people in the best way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And typically for a lot of people, the impact or the behavior around that is they would maybe take on projects that they didn't ideally want to do. Maybe they would get a little bit panicked and a little bit flustered in those downtimes. Like, what were some of the things that came up for you as like a negative result of overly reliant on your kind of existing network and not being able to communicate your value that well?
I guess it feels like there's no control there. It feels like there's no control over any sort of future pipeline, if you like. It's very much just sort of, as you grow your network, you know a lot of good people who move around in various roles and then come back to you for work, but it's very sort of passive, and you're relying on the work that you're doing at the moment and waiting for someone to sort of pop up and remember you.
One of our a real strong skill set for us as a team is we're really good at turning our hand to lots of different genres, lots of different types of projects, and to being like super flexible and applying our creativity in lots of ways, which is great. But we would literally, all the work was incoming. There was no kind of us going looking for work. So, every time we tried to kind of go, oh, right, we're going to do this. 2 months later, we're like, oh, right, we're doing this now. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, cool. But there was no sort of structure to it.
So it's a little bit reactive instead of proactive.
100% reactive.
Okay.
Yeah, and also when we did to try from time to sort of maybe try something new or sort of try a different approach or perhaps sort of go down a certain path, let's focus our efforts here. A lot of the time the success rate wasn't great because we didn't have a sort of really strong strategy to go and, demonstrate our value in that direction.
So if you look back now, almost 2 years since we first had that conversation, what would you say are some of the main things that have changed or improved?
I think there's been a lot of structure put in place, which has been the biggest thing. So in several areas of our business, I think from becoming a bit more professional with how we run our business in the back end. So everything from, structured bookkeeping and looking at the accounts and, all of the systems that we have in place in and the different, getting everything out of our head and onto structured bits of paper. So any of the team can kind of pick that up. That's been a big thing. And then in terms of how we try and bump into new clients and new talented people and new interesting people around the world. So like a very targeted use of like going out there, like an outreach thing, trying to go and find our ideal people we want to work with rather than waiting for them to come to us. We're like very deliberately going out and saying, hey, we love what you do. We should definitely work together because I think it would be great.
Yeah. That's sort of like the vehicle. And I love to unpack some of these because I think there's some things that you guys have done that people listening to this podcast will find really valuable. One of the things that we spoke about earlier was getting paid to work on pitches, which is like a really cool thing. So there's all these kind of vehicles or mechanisms. But if we just look at the actual challenge, so you were kind of burning out, didn't have a great work-life balance. How is that now for you?
I mean, yeah, it still can be sort of full on from time to time. And I guess that's just the sort of the game we're in. We know it's very similar with a lot of contemporaries, but it's certainly much more manageable than it was. And we've got a great team around us. We can now delegate to a great bunch of people. We've got a great bunch of collaborators. We've got some great systems in place so that we can spread that work and have it work better for us. So the work-life balance is definitely better. And there's just a lot less things in our head. We have proper systems for tracking. I mean, we've always had project management software for the past sort of 10 years, 15 years, but now we have proper systems in place for sort of, future work and likely work and things on the horizon and pitches and things like that. So there's a lot, as it's grown, there's a lot more things now into systemization rather than just being in our heads, which allows to free up the mental load to focus on the important stuff like the creativity and the jobs and the solution finding for the clients.
How do you feel when you come into work on a Monday now?
I still feel tired, but for different reasons. Just because we've had a busy family weekend or something. And I come into work and I'm like, right, okay, a bit of a break. I can actually focus and get on. So it's a different kind of thing now. But very occasionally you start kind of feeling a bit burnt out, and that's always a bit of a red flag. But we're like really open about talking about that, and we're like, okay, well, what's changed and how can we readdress that? Yeah,
and I think that's an important thing, right? So what's different to the way that you approach that when you start feeling burnt out to how you approached it in the past?
And it always comes down to what's on your plate, and without realizing you fall into bad habits of kind of holding on to stuff when actually you could be delegating things. Sometimes I think, it's just quicker to do it myself rather than to brief somebody to do it. But then inevitably there's just not enough time in the day. So you 100% need to kind of be delegating everything across the team that can be delegated. So it frees up your time to do these things over here, and it just gets it out of your head. And I think it's keeping everything in your head all the time, and all those spinning plates. That's when it's tough.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a bit like a chief of staff sometimes, trying to sort of protect a lot of his time and keep stuff off his desk. So, they'll joke within the team that sometimes they call me Mr. Can You, because I'll be the person thinking, right, he doesn't need to do that, let's get that off his plate or whatever, because you've got to decide what's the best use of your time. And I think, in years gone by, we wouldn't be as mindful. We now think we're very mindful of what's the best use of our time. So we're looking at everybody's priorities and everybody's list and saying, is that the best use of their time? Is there someone else that should or could be doing that? Because that person could be, either that's better for their skill set or for their hourly rate. There's crazy somebody on that sort of hourly rate doing that job when that can be done by someone else. So it's about sort of protecting time and focusing the priorities and making sure that they're the right priorities, and anything that's not the key priority is either done further down the list or done by somebody else.
And I think between the three directors, myself, Chris and Dan, we're really good at calling each other out as well. So if Dan works up in Manchester, so he's not here on a day-to-day basis, but we're constantly communicating with him. But I'll hear Chris getting stressed and I'll be like, why are you doing that? And he's like, oh yeah, all right, I'll hand that off. Do you know what I mean? It's just those kind of moments you're like, we just need to spread the load.
That was actually one of the best things about coaching you guys, is like one person would pick up a learning or a way of thinking or something like that. As a really good example, I remember when we first started working together, you had this belief but it's just quicker for me to do it. And it took a while for us to kind of change that. And
no, I still think that, but
but you just
I know
don't
it's
act
not true.
on it.
But I still feel that, definitely.
Yeah, but you just don't. You decide not to act on it. But then what I like is then Chris will pick something up that I've said, and like maybe that hasn't quite landed with you, and then Chris will be like, no, hold on a minute, let me challenge you on that, and then I hear almost like Chris playing that role, and that's a really nice feeling as a coach, because you know that what you're seeding in there is being picked up internally, and it's not just like you're saying something, it's kind of falling on deaf ears, and then you come back a week later and it's like the same problems and challenges. And so I just wonder, what's one of the ideas or new ways of doing things that you felt the most resistance to?
I don't know about you, but for me it's really easy. It's the kind of, I'm like super resistant to feel like the sales side of the business. I just don't like it. I mean, I know this is a failing in me, and it's a failing probably in our business, but I'd much rather kind of have these really good relationships with our clients and get to know them and kind of do a good job with them. And a lot of them end up being our friends over the years. We work together with people for years, and I kind of have this kind of visceral reaction to sales and marketing stuff. So, I'm just like super resistant to that, really. So it's trying to do that, but in our own way, I suppose. So it doesn't feel like it's a sales or marketing thing, but at least there's that kind of thinking and strategy behind it without that kind of cold face of sales.
Yeah, and I guess the world we work in, because there's so much sort of creativity, it feels a lot more about collaboration than it does about, sales. I mean, you can call it what you will if you like, but, we are collaborating with partners and clients to create some amazing outcomes. And from that point of view, it feels like it's a hand-in-hand thing. Everyone plays their part. Everyone brings their own strengths to the table within our team and within the wider teams and within the wider sort of projects and clients we work with. So from that point of view, it feels like it's more of a collaborative project rather than a sort of hard-nosed sales
machine,
yeah, a machine, I suppose.
Yeah. And how have you overcome that?
I think we found our way of working through it. I remember some of the early sessions with you, like you'd stand up there or you'd talk about your systems and stuff, and I'd be like, yeah, that's a no-brainer, of course, it's obvious. And then I'd go away and think about it or try and implement some of it, and I'd be like, it doesn't work for me. And it's just trying to find your own spin on it. So like sort of zooming out a bit, I guess, and sort of like finding what you're talking about and then kind of implementing that structure to what, the way that we work.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of where the coaching comes in, right? And it's kind of like why I think a lot of people struggle with just the strategy, because like there's nothing wrong with the strategy, but if you don't like it and you feel resistance to it, then you're never going to implement it. And so that's where the kind of coaching part comes in, which is like, okay, well, first of all, what's the thing that you feel resistance around? Is there any like beliefs that we need to dig into there? Is there any like things we need to challenge you on? But then also, okay, well, how could this work for you? And then kind of opening your mind up to taking the same principles, but just applying it in your own way. So what are some of the ways that you have implemented these strategies? Because I know one of the big breakthroughs that you talked to our community about was your new sort of lead generation system. And so you've gone from having basically no strategy in terms of getting work to having a system that basically consistently produces meetings in your diary with quite important people. And you've had some projects come off the back of that, right?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a game changer for us. And again, maybe just for me internally, it's just about kind of creating these opportunities to bump into people that we would do in our professional lives anyway. But it's just kind of supercharging those moments and just kind of getting direct into speaking to the right people and being like super efficient with the time.
Can you just give us some examples of tangible things that you've actually done that maybe you weren't able to do before, just for people listening so they understand what you mean by like supercharging those relationships?
Yeah. So for us, our background is working in kind of radio. So that was kind of our network of people was very much in that world. And as over time, as we've got more into using a lot of those skills and our marketing skills and things in the live experience world and doing soundtracks for big live experience events, it's kind of really tricky trying to network with those kind of people. And, I guess back in the day, you would go to conferences, you would, spend your time traveling and just like networking and trying to expand your network that way. But the world's different now, right? And, we can kind of sit in our office and communicate directly with creative directors or marketing managers or MDs all over the world, like really directly, and just kind of cut out all of that, the kind of the chance element of bumping into the right people and just go straight to meeting them.
Yeah. And I think, in years gone past, we didn't really use LinkedIn at all, did we? No. It wasn't even it was on our radar, but we didn't sort of see it as a really valuable tool. And in the last probably 3 years or so, it's just sort of supercharged what we're doing. It's allowed us to find the right people, to connect with the right people, to share ideas with the right people, to collaborate with the right people. And it's just become a really sort of valuable tool to expand our network and make the right connections.
And also keep across what's going on because, and just scrolling through the feed every day, you're kind of really aware of what's happening in the industry more so than you would have been by having to rely on magazines or whatever it was.
Can you think of a moment where you realized, oh, this is actually a strategy that's working now? Because I remember initially you had a bit of resistance towards the idea of reaching out to people on LinkedIn and being a bit more active. Can you remember the moment where that shifted in your head, or a moment where you went, oh, this is interesting?
I guess just access to some of the people that would have been really tricky to get access to, where, just by contacting people out of the blue, but with the right kind of message, really, not in a salesy thing, just, in that kind of very conversational, hey, I love what you do and we do this. And I think that we'd work really well together. Let's have a call. All of a sudden you're kind of on a Zoom call with some very high level people and you're like, oh, okay, this is great. Excellent. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, and in the past, even though we might have, it's one thing to sort of find the right people to chat to, but then it's about how to communicate and how to show the value of what we do and show our expertise. And we didn't have a strategy behind that either, did we?
No, and actually, it's a really good point. So I mean, I still find it difficult now when you meet someone and they're like, oh, what do you do? Right, well,
how long have you got?
I do this and I do this and I do this. And you sort of see them kind of glaze over. It's like, oh, it's a bit cool, but they're like, I don't understand. So kind of refining that message into what it is that we actually do has been really powerful as well. That was really powerful.
Our community are the only ones that were privy to see the whole system at play, but you were one of our case studies where a few things happened. Number one, you were booking calls with some really kind of high profile people that you wanted to get in front of. Number two, you were doing it consistently, like you had a system around it. And number three, it was something that your team were helping you to manage. Can you just kind of give us a bit of a behind the scenes of some of the tactics, some of the strategies, some of the ways that you've been able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no sort of secret sauce there. It's just kind of being consistent, I guess, with the messaging and consistently just finding the right people. It's about deciding who are your ideal clients, who do I really want to work with, and going, right, well, let's get a list of all those people and all those different companies, and let's just like chip away at messaging them and getting those conversations going, really.
Yeah, and using, the support of our team to help research the right people, and to help sort of, work out, because, there's only so many hours in the day. And while we obviously spend time on LinkedIn, there's plenty of times where we'll ask our sort of team to help us in looking into certain companies or certain roles, or, who did that show, for example. I'd love to speak to them. Yeah. And then we've got some sort of help, Fran and our team can help us with that, to do a bit of research for us and help us then connect with the right people, and using sort of systems to help streamline the booking process of, whether it's Calendly or whatever it is, to get chats in the diary, and then just to help automate the process in terms of making it as frictionless as possible to identify the right people, have the right conversations, and make them realise the value we can bring, and then sort of have a chat on the call and see how we can help them.
And logging that process as well, because it's so complicated and stressful keeping everything in your head. Inevitably, you forget things. So it's about just having a CRM that's kind of, you literally track things through. So every day you're like, oh yeah, of course I need to speak to that person, or oh yeah, wow, it's been a while since I've, reached out to them. So it's just kind of having that system in place so that things don't fall down the cracks.
I know a lot of people will resonate with what you said around being salesy. I know a lot of people will resonate with this idea of how do I start the conversation. I know a lot of people resonate with this idea of being able to communicate the value concisely of what you do. So what are some of the things that you've changed? What are some of the ways that you are able to now start conversations with people without being salesy? And then how do you get them on a call? And how do you now demonstrate the value of what you do? Like what's changed?
Yeah, I guess it's about just having a bit of a pathway that you have in the back of your head. So rather than having that initial communication, we're like, we can do this and we can do this and we should, it's just about, hey, we love what you've done here. We do this and we think it would be great if we, it's at least worth having a conversation and getting them onto that conversation. And then it's like just seeing if you've kind of got that rapport and if you can sort of spot those kind of obvious ways in which you can help them out. And if not, cool, we'll see if we can kind of introduce you to some other people. So there's kind of a good use of their time as well. But more often than not, there's some really obvious ways in which we can work together because we've been very targeted with who we're trying to talk to. And then it's just having a bit of a structure so, we can effectively communicate how we can work with them and like some of the problems that we can kind of solve. And, a lot of people have the same kind of issues really. And everyone's just trying to find more efficient ways of working, right? And we've got our expertise and we're really strong expertise in certain areas that they won't have in-house. So it's like, right, well, look, we can work with you here and this is our system for doing that. And just, as Chris said, make it really frictionless. And it's just about taking sort of steps towards an end goal.
Yeah, and also a lot of the people we're sort of either working with or chatting to, some are sort of very advanced in terms of their sort of understanding and use of audio, and some are more rudimentary. So sometimes it's about opening someone's mind or thinking about, yes, we could do it in this way, but there's a whole other way of thinking about it. If we can zoom out and if we can apply that approach to the wider picture, for example. So we try and work with people where possible as soon as possible in the creative process, because if you wait until it's all the way down the line to the end of the process, when maybe it's to the very end of the piece, someone thinks, I haven't thought about the music, or, what should we do or whatever, where actually there's so many different ways that you can enhance the creative by applying our process earlier in the creative journey, I guess, where there might be whole other ways that audio can live rather than just some sort of end product, if you like. There's, there might be some sort of sound design or sonic logo or some sort of recall piece or mnemonic or something, there's so many different ways that the creative can be affected and boosted by the audio, that if we have the opportunity to chat and to make some suggestions and come up with some solutions earlier on in the creative brief, we can actually steer the narrative sometimes to enhance it and to maybe open up pathways to connect with the audience that wouldn't have been possible if it was the last piece in the process and it was like, now we need a piece of music, because it's so much more than that.
Yeah, and I guess what we've kind of seen over time is the soundtrack, or the kind of the creative sound element tends to, for big shows, tends to be the bit in the middle that glues, whether it's cool drones or cool pyro or projection mapping, it's the bit that kind of glues it all together. So it's kind of really important for us to kind of work right at the beginning of the process to help steer that. And that's like a way that we can add a lot of value to projects. And, even like working with people when they're doing their RFPs and their pitches, it's like we can actually help people get stuff over the line and like win more business. That's what we're finding, is we can work with them right at the beginning and actually give them something that's so much more powerful for their clients, that people end up winning more business. And then it kind of works well because we're then on the project right from the start, and we can kind of get all of that really creative thinking right from the beginning.
Yeah, and to help sort of turbocharge the emotion of the piece and stuff by introducing that audio and finding the best way of doing it. It just makes it so much more powerful and much more tangible, and just much more engaging when someone's either looking at an RFP or a pitch or even the sort of the final project. It really is what can make the difference between a good event and a great event.
And I know that's something a lot of people struggle with, whether you're running an audio production agency or an animation studio, is people just coming to you and saying, oh, we've made all these decisions and we just need X, Y, and Z. And you kind of feel like you're in this worker mode where you've got a skill set that they don't have and you're kind of just pushing buttons around. What were some of the fundamental things that allowed you to shift away from that and more into this partner where you're getting brought in at the beginning of the creative projects?
I think it's a mindset thing more than anything, and it's about the message that when we're speaking to people, it's about what we talk to them about. I think it's less about being a supplier and more about being almost like a partner or a creative consultant, or just someone that can kind of support a creative director on their journey, I suppose.
Because one of the things that we spoke about before was this challenge of always just being brought in at project stage and only having work if there was a project there. Whereas one of the things we've been working on recently is this idea of helping people with that initial pitch before there's actually a project. And you've actually got to the point where you're delivering enough value to be able to charge for that. What were some of the things that allowed you to get to that point?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an education piece with different clients that we work with, and sort of showing them the value in how we can help them really early on. And, having success when they're pitching on something, coming up with really creative executions of the audio in ways they would never have thought of had it not been for speaking with us.
In some ways that actually changes the route of the narrative of the creative to make it so much better when it's viewed through the prism of if we do this with audio, then that can completely change the outcome of the creative itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about taking much more of an active role in supporting them on their way. And the moment that you kind of show that value, then you kind of see them kind of go, oh yeah, right, great. And then I get calls saying, right, you wanted to speak to me right at the beginning of this. Well, I've just had a brief in. Can we have a conversation about that? And that's the perfect time to speak to us, because we can then get some top line thoughts in there. We can kind of help scope out all the costs and things, and it's all kind of then built into the project rather than trying to find it all later.
Yeah, and it's often different creative solutions, isn't it? Because there's, some of these briefs are quite sort of wide and wieldy. They could go in many different directions. It's giving people solutions and options. This is one where you could enhance it in this direction that you might not have thought of. And then maybe on track A, this can allow you to do sort of track B. And that's actually a much more powerful outcome.
Yeah, and I think, when you're working with big agencies and on big projects, inevitably there is a budget for pitching, because it's taking up their internal resources working on this stuff. So why wouldn't you kind of put a bit of extra resource to making that pitch as powerful as it can be and communicate the story or the message of your idea as powerfully as possible? And that's the bit that we can really support people with.
So yeah, a complaint that I hear from creatives is they don't want to have to educate clients. They want their clients just to get the value of what they do. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that would be lovely, but I don't think it's realistic, because, you're talking about high-level people that are working in their own worlds, and why would they know what we do or how we do it? There's not some kind of ego thing at play here. It's just a case of, as I said right at the beginning, it's like when we work with people, it goes really well and we have long-term relationships with people, and it's about just kind of finding that way to let them trust you and to kind of see the value in what you can bring to the table and that kind of partnership thing. Because, if you're working with like high-end creative directors or something, these are really talented, skillful, creative people. And, I guess there might be a bit of a barrier of like them wanting to be the creative vision. And it's not us coming along saying, well, you should do this. And it's more like, I love what you do and you could do this, we could tweak that and do this. And that would be really powerful, really emphasize what you're trying to achieve here. And it's just that like, outside perspective and this kind of support role. That's what we try and really get across.
Yeah, and often it's, what are you trying to achieve and how can we make that better?
Yeah, so it's kind of like getting focused on their goals rather than focused on just what you're doing basically in your world.
Yeah, it's how can we help them to achieve the end product. I guess the message we always try and say with people, especially when we get starting to work with people, is we're all about storytelling. That's kind of the heart of everything that we do. It's about using the soundtrack or the sound design or whatever the audio elements that we're bringing to the table to really emphasize that storytelling and make it really, really obvious, and that kind of then connects with the audience or whatever the show is a better product for that, and that's what we're trying to do the whole time.
Okay. One thing that I've observed with the way that you guys run your business is this idea now that everything is a bit more professional. Can you kind of talk to me about the change in mindset between like where things were when we first met and how you run your business now?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think originally it was 100% driven by the work and the creative and the sort of job by job. We deliver every project, to the best of our ability, but there wasn't any sort of wider systemization or wider thinking or sort of better planning. It was quite sort of done in silo. And now we sort of, treat the business as a whole, and everything off the back of that is sort of, systemized or planned for. And it just feels like there's much more control over what we're doing. I guess that's what it is. You're not in control of everything, but at least you're in control of what you're monitoring, what's going up, what's going down, what you need to work on, what you maybe don't want to do anymore. Maybe what's something that's in the past we would have done and now it's not the right fit for us. So I guess it's about being more strategic and just putting more business systems in place to allow us to for that to sort of take care of itself, and therefore we can give our full creative direction on the creative, knowing that behind that there's a much more sort of professional support network.
And as the business has got bigger and we've got more members of staff and multiple offices and studio builds and equipment, and these costs kind of get larger and larger and larger. And whereas before, I guess we were a bit like, oh, there's money in the bank, it's fine. We'd, every few months we'd kind of take a look at it in our rudimentary kind of way. Now it's much more systemized, and we've got really good bookkeepers and business management strategies in place. So we're kind of monitoring the money coming in and the cash flow and, all of those kind of things that we literally weren't looking at before. It was much more organic before, whereas now it's much more regimented, which is great. But, it does bring other anxieties because you're looking at things like, oh, God, it's not as good this month as you thought it would be, or you're kind of planning for something and then that doesn't happen in the way things do. And whereas before we'd be blissfully unaware, now we're very aware.
Yeah, absolutely. So on one hand, that can cause more stress, but I guess on the other hand, you now have control to do something about it.
Yeah, you can see things coming a lot earlier. So you're like, right, we need to fix that bit.
Mm-hmm. What other benefits does it have making those systems work for you and thinking about the business in a more structured and professional way? How else does that show up for you in a positive way?
I guess it gives us sort of more freedom to, or for example, last year you were in New Zealand for 5 weeks, which in years before that would have been very, very, very difficult to do that because it was so hands-on and because we didn't have the ability to sort of let things, take care of themselves more, if you like. So now it works much better as a sort of allows us to have the creative lead and the creative direction, but sort of systems in place to allow us to take the time off when we need to and to allow things to sort of tick along in the background. So that is something that's massively changed compared to years gone past.
Yeah, I think going back to the stress thing as well and the workload, just not having so much in your head all the time. That's been the big thing for me.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, isn't it? It's like when people say that they feel burnt out or overwhelmed or whatever it is, it's like, it's because you're just storing too much stuff in your head. And it's just, yeah. So looking forward, what is now possible for you guys, having these systems in place, having implemented some of the things that we've talked about today? What does the future look like, and what are you excited to create?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about the opportunities that are coming up and some of the projects that we're talking about or actively working on that, you know, we just wouldn't have worked on before. And as we expand the network of people that we know, and all these really interesting creative people around the world, you know, I just get really fired up and excited about what that next brief is that comes through the door. That, there's nothing more satisfying than when you've kind of sort of found somebody or a company like, oh wow, I really like what they do, and then you have this strategy in place to go and actually contact somebody, and you get a meeting with them and you get a call, and then you have an opportunity to develop that conversation further. And that point where they're like, oh, actually, I've got this brief, there's this project just come in, I'd really like to get your thoughts on it. There's nothing more exciting than that moment, because it's like, yes, that's it, cracked it. You know, that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And, you know, getting some of these projects that we have the opportunity to work on and create are great. And we're working with really talented people on really fun stuff. And, you know, that really then drives my kind of creative ambition. And it's kind of, I guess, why we started doing this business in the first place is I want to be in the studio pressing buttons and doing cool, fun stuff. And, you know, I still do that. Less than before, but actually I've got a really talented team of people that I can kind of help brief and kind of collectively work on something, whilst at the same time working with all these cool people that I'd never have known all over the world as well. And that's great.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, because in the past, I think we'd have done a lot more hands-on ourselves. But as each year's gone on, the teams that we've brought along with us and the people we work with have just gone up and up and up. So now the scale and the size of the projects we're working on and the creative ambition of them is just next level. And it's just really exciting to be able to deliver those projects and have the clients super, super happy and know that we've done it as a team. We've played to our best strengths. We've played to our abilities, and also never having a dull day. I mean, when we have sort of new people come through on work experience, or when we bring new people into the business, every day's different. You know, it's all audio and it's all creative, but it's fun, it's different, and it's not like a sausage factory. You don't ever get bored of what you do. So from that point of view, it's not like working. It's high intensity and it's high level, and sometimes it's stressful, but it's great creative output and it's fun, and it's just the sort of things that just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I think also it's given us lots of confidence as well. You know, I think we've always been pretty confident in our own abilities to deliver what we can, but feeling more comfortable having those kind of conversations and structured with how you present yourself, which is great. And even doing things like this podcast. I would have hated doing this a couple of years ago, but, you know, it's fine. I'm on Zoom calls all the time. I do, you know, record little videos for clients and all sorts of stuff that we just never would have done before, which over time, I guess, is part of growth and learning, right? And learning different skills. And it's, you know, it's great that from that point of view.
Yeah, so it's like that personal development journey as well as the business development journey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Very welcome.
Great. It's been a pleasure.
Before you leave, if you found this episode valuable, please hit the subscribe button. Also, if you are a creative business owner doing more than 10K a month and you want to grow and scale without working longer hours or hiring a massive team, then I have something you may be interested in. We have just developed a tool that will give you a custom growth strategy based on exactly where you are in your business right now. So you can stop consuming lots of random content and trying to figure things out on your own and actually get something personalized to you. You will also receive a free copy of my book, and it will point out relevant chapters. If you'd like to take the scorecard, it's totally free. You just have to click the link in the show notes or connect with me on LinkedIn, and you will see a link in my bio. Thanks for listening. This is the Creative Courage Podcast.